Welcome to another session with the superintendent. My name is Terry Holmes, and I'm the school superintendent in Wakefield. And it's been my pleasure this year to welcome different guests to my program to discuss critical issues to the Wakefield School Department. So this morning we have with us Diana Minton, the Director of Special Ed, and certainly, Diana, your job is one that brings sufficient challenges and opportunities such that there are plenty of things to talk about today. So welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
As we begin today, Diana, perhaps you could give us some sense of the scope of your position. What are you dealing with in terms of either numbers of children or numbers of personnel or numbers of programs? Give us a little sense of that.
Well, we have, what I like to think of is special education is an invisible school within a school, in that we have programs throughout the system that deal with children with all sorts of different kinds of disabilities, some that are very visible, some that are pretty invisible. There's approximately 600 students. There's approximately more than 100 staff, maybe up to 120. A lot of those are support staff. The programs range from programs for children who have very severe disabilities and very noticeable disabilities. It may be that they see very poorly, they're hearing impaired, maybe even profoundly deaf. Some children who need a wheelchair to move around. We have children who need the support of nursing assistants because they have feeding tubes. Just a range of things. But most of the population is really children with learning disabilities. That would take the largest percent. And those are children who just are challenged by the reading process, the math process, the written expression, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, a variety of things that we in special education look at in a testing environment and try to find our best way to teach the children and to have them learn in our schools.
Mm-hmm. Our total school population runs approximately 3,450 children, and you indicated that 600 of these students are identified as needing special education. That percentage typically runs in the 16 to 17% range. How consistent is that with the state norms?
It is the state norms, and I don't know this year's, I can't quote this year's, but have run around 16%, okay. 16 to 17. And so we're staying pretty close to state norms.
Okay. Those 600 students have the opportunity to have really what's called contract learning. You write an IEP, an individual education plan, which is really a contract between the school department, which you certainly represent, and the parents in terms of what the educational needs of these children. Tell us a little bit more what this IEP thing is.
Well, once we get finished testing, as I mentioned earlier, we go into a team meeting where all the people who have done some evaluation around what is a suspected disability that is interfering with the child's ability to learn in the regular education classroom, we sit down with the parents, the classroom teacher, and anybody who has information about the child's learning, whether it's formal or informal. After we go through all the evaluation and look at the student's learning profile, from that we create an individual education plan in which we write information on the plan about the student's, how the student tested and maybe more technically what some of the areas of difficulty are. Then the other part of the plan talks about how that child learns and what best way to teach that child. And therefore the staff now has a blueprint, a contract, but more like a blueprint of where we're going to go next with this child to help them access the education here in Wakefield.
And what role does a parent play on this team evaluation?
The parent is in the process from the beginning. The parents must give us permission to evaluate their child. The typical way that they find out about the child having problems in school is through the classroom teacher, who begins to notice that the child is not keeping up with the curriculum. So from there, the parent and the teacher usually talk together and decide that maybe a referral to special education to look more deeply, to do the testing. At the end of the testing, back to the individual education plan, and forward into some support services if that is needed.
In the state, we often refer to the state law, Chapter 766, as the state law that complies with the federal law for special education. Can you give us any kind of a general description of who is, quote, educationally handicapped?
Both the state law and the federal law now have definitions, and they're definitions of what, for instance, I gave the examples of being physically impaired in a wheelchair or those kinds of things, or visually impaired, hearing impaired, and learning disabled. There is criteria or an eligibility guideline now in the state of Massachusetts. It's no more as a criteria under the federal standard, where students need to have a defined disability and not be making effective progress in their classroom.
Okay. So it's really those students who are not having the kind of success that they should have in the
Right.
classroom are candidates for referral.
Yes.
And then once the referral is reviewed by a team of educators, including a strong
parent.
role of the parent,
Yes.
then a individual education plan can be designed and approved, and then it is the responsibility of the school department to enforce that.
Yes, and just to mention, the parent, to finish off with the individual education plan, the parent has the right to accept or reject that
Okay.
plan. So the controller stays
Parents
with
have
the
a
family.
very strong
They're a
role
strong
in
part of that whole
this whole
team
issue.
process.
We often refer to the federal regulation as it relates to special ed as Public Law 94-142. Again, the 94 and the 94th Congress, who enacted that back now 20 years ago in the late 70s. And by the way, I think it's been one of the greatest pieces of legislation this country has ever known.
I agree with you.
We are really improving the quality of life, or have improved over the last 20 years, the quality of life of all handicapped young people significantly by this legislation. Is there any decided difference between the state law and the federal law?
The federal law, 94-142, has been renamed Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. And it has pretty much stayed the course throughout its history, being reviewed by the Congress of the United States and continued in pretty much the same form. Massachusetts law came a little bit before 94-142, to which Massachusetts takes some pride.
Right, that's great.
And in their law, they were even more liberal than the federal statute around who is considered a child in need of special education. They have since, with the eligibility guidelines, tightened that a bit because our numbers do really go beyond what the national percentages are. We are the highest percentage state in the nation, and that's not logical, being that we are Massachusetts.
Okay. And that high percentage compared to the national standard has led to a lot of debate in the state of Massachusetts in the last probably 5 or 6 years, and probably always has had a lot of debate. But that debate has really escalated in the last several years to the governor having established a task force to look at the whole issue of the special ed law. And our local senator, Senator Desai, has played a very strong role on that task force as established by the governor. Can you give us any sense of where this task force is and what maybe some of the recommendations might be?
Well, I'm very pleased at the makeup of the task force, for one thing. The task force is made up of superintendents and special education directors, both people who know the challenges, both from the whole view of a whole education system in educating all of the children, and the special education directors whose responsibility is to implement the law. To have those two bodies together talking over what the difficulties are with implementing the law has brought out a recommendation from the task force that really speaks to continuing special education. In no way does it really attack special education. It attacks a few things that are problem from the more from the financial point of view, and from concerns over school systems getting too litigious in the way we deal. We want to deal with the children and their disabilities in their education and move away from sort of that legal side of it. And I think the task force is very strong in trying to remove some of those things that make us really more legally
I certainly have been concerned over my career as a superintendent with the bureaucratic requirements of special ed, the numbers of meetings of teachers, which in many ways take these people out of the classroom to deal with the bureaucracy of special ed, and therefore take it away from direct services to youngsters. And certainly I would never be a proponent of ever taking away less services to youngsters. I'd like to find ways to use the current system to give more services to youngsters, yet take that away on the bureaucratic side. It's become a lot of paperwork.
Yes,
and I'm
it
sure
has.
you know that because you have to do it even better than I. You also raised the issue of the financial challenges of,
Yes.
special ed. And quite frankly, one of the bright spots in my coming to Wakefield is that special ed is always expensive, but it's never gotten to be a significant budget issue here. To your compliment, you've been able to really contain the cost of special ed in Wakefield, and that is just not the case in many school districts in Massachusetts. It gets to be an annual event of needing more and more money for special ed. And Wakefield has enjoyed really containing of those costs. Now, they're still expensive,
Yes.
but we have not had to go back to our public for significant additional money for special ed, and I compliment you for that.
Thank
But
you.
how have you been able to do that?
Well, I think it comes down to excellence in education. When I and all the people in the department are very proud of the work that we do, extremely proud of the work that we do. And we work for excellence. And because we have continually improved, and with your support, when I come to you and say there is a budgetary need, you have never refused that. You were concerned, naturally you are the superintendent, but you have always said what needs to happen in special ed and you feel is appropriate in the special education department, then we need to do it. And because of that, we have built a reputation of having excellence in special education in Wakefield that I'm very proud of. And, and a lot of that has to do with not either you or myself, but the staff that we have gathered together to do this important work.
Another thing I've been very pleased with in coming to Wakefield, and more specifically Massachusetts, is I feel that the mediation of conflict approach in this state has taken away a lot of the contentiousness that can be a part of coming to agreement on what a good individual ed plan might be. So I compliment the state for having done a lot of good work in setting up appropriate mediation of when there are conflicts between the team and the parent to assure that all the focus really is on what's really best for the kid. And I give the state and certainly you and your team people the appropriate credit for doing a good job with that. As we now look beyond today, what are some of the challenges we face in Wakefield in the next few years, Diana, with special ed?
Well, it's funny I should be here today because yesterday I had a meeting with a number of the staff, and I use sort of a Socratic seminar approach when we sit down, which means that everybody talks and talks about concerns and issues and frustrations, especially this time of year when we're moving into the transition for students. The concerns that are coming not only here in Wakefield, but across the state is the complexity of the disabilities. We have a medical community that's doing a wonderful job of saving many babies and young children. But the children are also coming in with some pretty major disabilities, which therefore, even though the number stays the same, the severity of the problems have increased. The other thing that is a concern to the nation as a whole is a deterioration in family and the structures of the family and the support from the families. And we see that in statistical information that's in the report that you referred to earlier, that we have some real statistical information that's telling us our children are coming in less ready to do schoolwork.
And with increasing emotional type problems that get in the way of their getting an appropriate education. And that sort of is the new challenge, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Emotionally handicapped area of kids struggling with the pressures of life, if you will, and of the family. As we finish our time this morning, any little pearls of wisdom, any issues you'd like to raise, any final comments you'd like to share with the Wakefield public about the issue of special ed and where we are?
Well, I think it's really old-fashioned information. It's common sense information. It's information about sitting down with your children and talking to them, finding out what's happening in their lives, making sure that they have a place and a time to do homework. Respect the homework process, because it's very important to the daily learning process. You put your child at a disadvantage if they walk into school not having done the homework. Each class they go into with unfinished work from the night before puts them behind the 8 ball with the other students and hurts their self-esteem. So supporting your child and supporting the education, which we said for, I think, since we started schools, it's the same information.
The research just time and again says the more involved parents get with the kids, the more advantage the kids will have to get what's right and proper.
And that includes with or without disabilities.
Right. Well, thank you, Diana. Thank you for the job you do, and thank you for joining us this morning.
And thank you very much for having me. I
Good.
enjoyed having the time.
Good.